Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Clockedin with me, your host, Jordan Edwards. I'm thrilled to have you tune in as we dive into the dynamic world of productivity, success, and stories of incredible individuals who've mastered the art of getting things done. Whether you're commuting, hitting the gym, or just relaxing at home, this podcast is the go-to source for inspiration and actionable tips to level up your productivity game. I'm on a mission to unravel the secrets of those who seem to effortlessly manage their time and achieve their goals. So if you're ready to clock in and unlock your full potential, you're in the right place. We've got a lineup of amazing guests, industry experts, and thought leaders who will share their insights and strategies to help us crush your to-do list and make the most out of every moment. Get ready to get inspired, motivated, and equipped with the tools you need to supercharge your productivity. This is Clockedin with Jordan Edwards. Let's dive in. Hey, what's going on? So we got financial literacy during a recession. This is part 3, and we have a special guest today. We have Jack Weber. He's a financial advisor with Mass Mutual. He helps people with life insurance. He helps manage money. But today he's just going to really simplify it down to help us understand what's going on. Like, what's this all about? So Jack, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Jordan. Thanks for having me.
Are you in the office right now?
I am in the office. I figured I knew we had this on the calendar for the last couple of weeks, so blocked off some time to stay late and figured have a nice quiet space for this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love it. So Jack, what got you into like finance?
Great question. I've always kind of had a passion since I was younger for saving money in general, and kind of just looking towards the future and knowing that, if you work hard enough and you kind of have the discipline, you'll have the ability to really do what you want, right? And kind of be and work towards financial independence. Going to college, and that's obviously where we met down at UT.
Yeah.
And getting my degree and then coming back to New York, it's financial planning. Kind of always known I wanted to be in that industry. And I, kind of what we're going to talk about tonight, there's certainly a disparity in our country right now when it comes to kind of financial literacy and financial IQ. And if I can, provide some value to people our age and, people that are just going to college now and really shed some light on, financial planning and investing and long-term investing. I think it'll put our country in a much better place and a lot of individuals in a better place and allow them to be financially independent, hopefully, when they're at a younger age than what we're seeing right now.
Yeah. So you brought up a few words, and like before we get started with the brochure, just explain what is financial literacy, what's financial independence, what does all that mean? Because
that's also,
it can be confusing.
It can, right? So obviously you can kind of define it in a lot of different ways, right? It might mean something to financial independence. Let's start with that one, right? That might mean have different meanings to different people, right? Because to be financially independent, to you and I, that could mean not working at all, or to you, that could mean just being able to travel at nonstop, right? So different people might have different definitions. I like to define financial independence as being able to choose whether you can work full-time, part-time, or no time. And if you can choose either of those three, I would consider you financially independent, right? And a lot of people work to get to be financially independent by a certain age, right? You don't just get to be 25, 30, or without getting pretty lucky, right? And just being financially independent immediately. You might be able to live a luxurious lifestyle, but normally when I do my planning with clients, we aim to try to get people to be financially independent by 45 or 50 years old, right? And it takes a lot of discipline and it takes a lot of planning, but it really starts with raising your financial IQ, right? Understanding more about budgeting, more about investing, more about where your money should be allocated so that it can be as productive as possible.
Yeah. And with most of this money, do you systemize it, or is it just kind of like, I'm feeling like it, I feel like we should do this?
Yeah, I think consistency is key, like it is with most things in life, right? Obviously, automation is really important, and trying to, create a system in place to get people to save money out of a habit, right? Because it takes a long time to understand that, my money's doing this for me. It's working for me if I'm careful, if I'm disciplined, if I'm patient. Patience is a big part of that, which I'm sure we can talk about later as well. But it takes some time. But the end goal, of course, like most things, is to get into a rhythm of consistency, which can then build compound exponentially over time.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. It's incredible, and it's usually the first step. And a lot of people use a bunch of different methods to do it. There's a lot of different avenues.
Sure are.
So what Jack's going to dive into is just one idea, one preference. And I say that because no one is right or no one is wrong. It's just a little bit more of information, seeing what different ways it can work, and we'll kind of dive into it. So Jack, we're going to do an audio here. So just when you share your screen, understand that there's still the audio.
Yeah.
Because we're going to make this a podcast.
Yeah, we'll try to transcribe and walk through all the graphics as best as possible. That's no problem at all.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I will share my screen now, and I see we have Jordan. It's shared. You can see.
Yeah.
Cool.
Setting financial goals as easy as 5, 10, 15, 20.
Yeah. So I think I've used this brochure before with some clients and at some other webinars and seminars before, and it's kind of a very good place to start. I feel like it's very surface level, right? And it gives kind of the 30,000 foot view, and a good place to kind of get the brain flowing, get thinking long term, and really get a better sense of what planning can look like, right? Where should the focus be? What are most Americans concerned about? And I see we got 1, 2, 3.
One of the things you mentioned is, and I know we talked about this in previous ones, but just discuss a little bit about that long term versus short term, because I don't know if everyone really understands what that means. What's that time horizon looking like? What do you mean when you say long term?
Yeah, for the most part, anything long term is usually more than 12 months, I would say. If you're really planning for something in the short term, that's usually within a year, right? You have a goal to buy a house, buy a car, go on a trip, finance something, right? In general, that you're aiming for in the next 12 months. That's usually the short term, right? So you're going to want to be liquid. You're going to want to have your money allocated somewhere where you're going to be able to access it, right? Anything more than 12 months, that's what I would consider long term. Right. So it's a little longer. You have your eyes on something, but it's going to take a little while to get to it. That's the long term, if that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely.
I see we got about 5 other individuals on here. Before we jump into it, I'm just kind of curious, who here budgets month to month? Who here has a budget?
Yeah, and you guys can just use the comment section or
comment section. You can raise your hand. You can
do whatever works.
Whatever works.
I know for myself, one of the techniques I use is the credit card. It's an interesting budget mechanism, but I use a credit card because I know what my number is, and I talked about this in the first episode. Basically, you set up your number, whatever that spending number is, whether that's $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, and that credit card is used for that personal expense. If you have other expenses with like your business, use that credit card and you make sure to pay it off every single month. But that's one of the ways I am able to budget myself.
That's a great way. But obviously that probably took you a couple months to figure out how to track that, right? I mean, at least to be
100%. It doesn't just happen.
Yeah. So obviously, it took a couple months for you to understand, all right, I'm going to see what the number is that I actually end up spending. Then the next month, I imagine maybe it was a little different. And after a while, you started to see some consistency, right? And that gave you a better sense of understanding, okay, this is the amount of money that I'm spending on X. Now I need to focus on Y, right? How much money do I need to bring in, right? And that's kind of why I brought up budgeting, because not a lot of people budget right now. Right. And it really, that's the important part about financial IQ. That's the foundation, right? It really starts with a healthy budget. Do you understand how much money is coming in and how much money is going out? There's a scary statistic that 51% of Americans, so majority, can't account for 20% of their gross income. right? So if you are making $100,000 before taxes, right? Your salary is 100,000, you haven't paid taxes yet. People can't account for where 20,000 of that $20,000 goes. They have no idea. It goes into the ether.
What do you mean by that? How is that even possible?
It's a great question, right? It means that it's the ability to swipe your card, like you were just talking about, and not even think twice about it, right? And
I get what you're saying,
and truly not even realize that your dollars are going somewhere. And I mean, it can be in the form of subscriptions that we just haven't canceled, right? A $12 subscription that we had signed up for one time, it gets deducted from our checking account. We don't even see the charge, right? I don't know how many people look at their statements every now and then, but I promise you there's probably some charges on there that you're like, what is that? I didn't even know I was paying for that. About a couple of years ago, I realized I'd signed up for HBO Max twice. And it only happened like 2 months in a row. And then I realized it. And I'm like, what the heck? How did that happen? Right. So the ability to make sure that, we really have a better understanding of where our money is going is so important. That is the foundation. Any questions, any thoughts on that at all before we kind of dive into the whole 5, 10, 15, 20? Jordan, all good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think one of the really interesting things you brought up is the way that we're able to understand and really track our money. Because I think we're going to dive into, and this is one of the methods, just automating it, where you don't even see it. And it happens before you're even able to spend it, because as much as in our account, we're going to spend.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to just, it comes down to a lot of awareness too, right? And I mean, everybody here has goals, and that's kind of along the lines of what this pamphlet, this brochure is kind of going to dive into, but that's really where it all comes down, right? Because if you guys have goals, you guys have desires, there's things that you want to achieve, it's going to come down to a plan, right? That's really where this starts, right? Why are goals so important? Well, it's sitting down and saying, all right, how am I going to get there? Like anything, building a business, running a marathon, purchasing a home for the first time, whatever that might be, we have to start with a plan, right? And obviously, nothing's set in stone, right? Life's going to change, right? It's going to require us to come back and do more due diligence. It's going to require you to come back and make changes, right? Life's ever changing. Our income changes. It fluctuates drastically from year to year, right? Whether that's up or down. We switch industries, we switch careers. So depending on how that works, obviously it requires a lot of tweaks, but also just to make sure that you actually have a plan in place to make sure you can get to where you want to go.
Absolutely. So a good question for everyone at the start is what do you want to accomplish? What do you really want to do? So it's a financial thing, but it's more of a life thing.
It is. And, when looking very long term, like let's take a very macro lens approach to financial planning, right? If we're looking long term, there was a study done recently that said that the thing that keeps most Americans up at night is retirement, right here in the top right hand corner. That's the one thing keeping most Americans up, which I found very interesting, because there's a lot of fears out there. There's a lot of things people could be worried about, and it's retirement, right? Will I have enough money eventually to be able to retire, live the lifestyle that I am accustomed to, that I want, that I'm expected, that I want to live, right? That keeps people up at night. And the question is, all right, how do we get to that point? So 5, 10, 15, 20s kind of touches on a lot of different areas, but I think it's a really good baseline, a good place to start. And you guys, I don't know if you can see my screen, hopefully you all can, but on the 5 is the idea of attempting to increase your annual income by at least 5% each year, right? So depending on the industry we're in, depending on, if you have multiple jobs, maybe you work one job from 9 to 5, and that's a salary paying job, but you have the ability to, go make commissions or different, some additional income on top of that. Whatever that looks like, being able to increase your annual income by 5% each year is massive. Anything more than that is fantastic as well. And obviously inflation is a large part of that too, where, companies provide raises for that exact reason, right? We're seeing inflation right now where the cost of living is going up, right? It's incredibly high right now. So to be able to make sure that we can continue to live the lifestyle that we're used to, we need that bump in income, right? That's step number 1. Jordan, that makes sense? Any questions there?
Yeah, that makes total sense. And one of the ways I've found utility in this, and I've seen utility just through our different conversations in this little series, is one of the ways is people investing in real estate. They're able to get the money, that appreciates, and they don't have to work on it. I mean, you do have to work on it, getting the deal, maintaining it, getting the tenant, all that stuff, but you do have to work. But that's one way to do it. It's also, you could do a side hustle where you're flipping couches, or you're selling lemonade, or you're doing legitimately anything. Because if you think about it, if you're making $100,000, that means you just need to make $5,000 on the side. Most people, if you put a little bit of effort in, will be able to accomplish that. And that's without getting any bonuses, raised, changes of jobs, whatever it may be.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you brought up real estate, tangible assets, right? I mean, in a time of inflation, obviously that's fantastic. So, I wrote down, when it comes to income, 57% of people in America right now live paycheck to paycheck. It's pretty scary, right? I mean, the idea of, if something were to go wrong, there's unexpected medical emergency, the engine in the car goes, right? Would you have the ability to then fix that without stressing, right? Fit paycheck to paycheck. So, being able to increase your income each year is so important to focus on, and, start brainstorming different ways. And the rest of this brochure kind of goes into some of those ideas and what that can look like. But next off the page, the 10, right, is saving at least 10% of your net annual income, right? So we can look at this from a net perspective. We can look at this from gross, right? But this focuses on net, which means after. Yeah.
You're already on it. I was going to say, explain gross, explain net.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had touched on gross earlier, which is, before taxes, right? Before you pay the government, before you pay state, depending on where you live. But whatever your base salary is, that's gross, right? After net, after all your deductions are paid out, what your paycheck really is, 10% of that is really what we should be allocating to a diversified strategy, right? Allocating our money to, I'm sure a lot of people on this call have 401ks, right? Maybe they have some IRAs, some retirement accounts. Maybe they have a trading account where, they buy some stocks, buy some options, and try to make some income off that, right? So, and then of course, maybe a savings account, right? They have an emergency fund to be able to dip into. All of those buckets that I just mentioned are combined into this 10%, right? So if you make $5,000 in a month, 10% of that is 500. Pay yourself first, right? Right away, take that 500, split it up, 100 there, 100 there, 200 there, 50 there, right? Keep balance it around. Make sure you're diversified. You have different financial vehicles working for you in different capacities. Any questions?
Yeah. What are these vehicles? What do you mean?
Well, different vehicles in the sense of, obviously, when we invest with a purpose, right? Trying to let our money make money, right? Let it work.
Okay.
And obviously the only way to do that is to take our money and invest it in the stock market, invest it into real estate, like you just mentioned, by purchasing assets, right? So the idea is that there's different types of vehicles, there's different types of accounts that specialize in a different type of investing, right? I always say invest with a specific objective in mind, right? So there's going to be different accounts that provide certain guarantees. There's going to be certain accounts that offer more risk with the ability to have a higher rate of return, right? There's going to be certain products that you could purchase with no risk at all, right? And it's going to be a nice flat guaranteed fee. So having all of what I just mentioned within your financial blueprint provides a sense of diversification. It provides a lot more guarantees, and it mitigates your risk over a long period of time.
Okay, awesome. And risk is, let's dive into that really quick. What do you think about risk? Because I know there's definitely people who are going to listen to this who think risk is bad. I get my money, I save my money, my emergency account. And I've seen everyone who does this, where it goes from I'll ask people, what's your emergency number? And they're like 5,000. Then as soon as they hit 5,000, they're like, my emergency number is 10,000. Now it's 20,000. Now it's 50,000. Why does it keep going up? People do that because it's, as you keep rising, you think you need more money for security, which is sometimes true. But if nothing changes, you should set that tone and then start investing that number. So I think there's a big misunderstanding on risk.
I would agree. Yeah. I mean, it's very circumstantial, right? People's risk
Of
tolerance
course.
vary across the board. And when you're investing, almost that's sometimes the first thing I ask, right? What's your risk tolerance? Because then that decides where you should be allocating your money. Are you someone that likes risk, right? Are you understand you're young, you understand you have time to earn your money back. You want to take as much risk as possible, hit a home run and make 30% on something, right? Or you're really hoping for that high rate of return. Or you don't like risk at all. You're incredibly risk averse. You do not like taking chances. You want guarantees. You don't care if you're only making 3, 4, 5, 6%, whatever that might look like. You want as little risk as possible, right? So that's going to drive where you really are allocating your money and the percentage of that money to all those different buckets that we just discussed.
And when we talk about risk, who are most like just profile a young 20-year-old and then a 60-year-old
Yeah, well,
about to retire?
profiling, that's pretty self-explanatory, right? The 20-year-old is going to be a little more risky, right? They have a longer time frame. They have a much longer runway, I like to say, right? If we use a retirement age of 65, that 20-year-old has 45 years to retirement, right? So they have a long time to earn a lot of income, save money, and get their feet off the ground, right? That 60-year-old, he's got a lot less time. He's realizing I'm retiring in 5 years, right? So there's a very decent chance that whatever I have right now, it might not look all that different in 5 years. So I'm going to have to change my risk tolerance. I'm going to have to change the makeup of my portfolio so that it reflects my situation more appropriately, right? And understanding that I'm going to need a certain amount of money to live in retirement. I can't risk that right now. So he's going to become much more conservative, the 60-year-old, and say, all right, I'm going to try to look for way more guarantees and mitigate my risk.
Absolutely. Yeah, I just think that's a great explanation because understanding where we are on the time horizon is huge.
Yeah, it is. And I think that was honestly maybe a really good segue, talking about retirement to number 15, right? 15 talks about targeting a retirement nest egg of 15 times your annual income. Now, everybody on this call, I believe for the most part, is pretty young, right? So the idea is that 15 times your annual income is not necessarily talking about your income today, right? It's talking about what your income looks like when you retire. So if you can have 15 times your annual income when you retire built up somewhere, financial professionals would consider that healthy, right? It would give you a very strong chance of surviving retirement without running out of money, right? And that's what a lot of Americans are scared of right now. They are terrified of running out of money. Life expectancy is long. Health is only getting better, right? Everybody on this call has a very good chance of living to 95 and up, at least, right? So life expectancy is in the mid 80s right now. So if you retire at 60, you're 15 to 25 years of retirement, right? Do you have enough saved up to make sure that you are ready to live the lifestyle you want, unlimited for that time period, right? A lot of people don't right now. So that 15 or that criteria, that metric of 15 times your annual income gives you the best chance or very good chance of making sure, all right, I'm not going to run out of money.
Yeah. And what are you seeing with like some of the people you meet with or some of the clients that are like, what do you see as their biggest regrets? Some of the ones nearing the retirement age.
Yeah. I mean, the main regret that we see the most is not starting early, right? Not starting soon enough. We get out of college at 22, right? 21, 22, we go to work. And it really kind of doesn't hit home for a lot of individuals, at least, some of the, I'd say more millennials and older millennials right now, they didn't really start saving until their mid 30s or late 30s, right? So when they got out of college, they were spending their money, they were kind of living their life. There's nothing wrong with that, right? But they just didn't save enough. And then they look back and they realize that time was wasted, right? They realized that if they had just allocated 5% of their net income, right? A sliver of some of that money that they were making, what that difference would have been, right? We call compound interest the eighth wonder of the world, right? The ability to make money on your money over a long period of time. The earlier you start, the better position you're going to be, right? So the idea is that if those older individuals, or at least even middle age right now, those regrets is just not starting soon enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
We can go on to number 20 though, and that is talking about debt, which is obviously really important. excluding a mortgage, the idea is to be able to have your debt paid down within 20 years, right? So that could be credit card debt, that can be student loan debt, that could be home equity loan, that could be a personal private loan that you took, right? It doesn't matter what that is, but excluding a mortgage, being able to pay that down within 20 years is a goal that a lot of people try to work towards, right? Because that's not easy. It builds up and it can happen fast. And debt can get scary, right? And Jordan, I think you covered credit cards in one of your recent segments. But obviously, there's good debt and there's bad debt, right? But bad debt, that can really hinder someone's financial ability, their financial blueprint for a very long time, right? The ability to make money on your money or be able to go buy a home, be able to get approved for a line of credit depends on how much debt you have. So it's so important to be really cognitive of what kind of debt you have and what's the interest rate and what are you doing about it. And once again, that just comes down to getting a plan in place.
Yeah. And you mentioned good debt, bad debt. And one of the things I like to think about is like when you also mentioned compound interest, the eighth wonder of the world.
Yeah.
It's also compound interest works in the reverse. So if you have credit card debt, if you have anything that's got a semi interest rate, this thing's going to compound in the opposite direction and you're going to have a struggle keeping up with it, because as it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, you could see how something goes from 1 to 2. I think Stephen brought it up. It's the pennies. Like, would you rather $2 million or 1 penny a day that multiplies for 30 days? And by the 30th day, it's like $5 million. It makes no sense.
Yep.
But that's the whole concept of the compound interest. And if we're able to understand that that's happening to us when we have credit card debt, and that's happening to us when we have student loan debt, and that's happening to us in all of these different instances, then you want to use the debt when it allows you to grow yourself, not just get knocked down.
It is. And it's just like I mentioned, it's just so important to be cognitive of that, right? Because like you kind of just said, it's so much easier to accrue interest on debt than it is to accrue interest on assets, right? Banks have no problem at all charging 20% on a credit card, right? But they're not giving 20% in our savings accounts, are they? No. So it doesn't work both ways, right? Fees are always going to be higher in their minds. So very important to be aware of, what's your debt status? What are the interest rates looking like? What's your plan to really manage it?
So if someone's got, let's say, we'll just make another profile. Say there's a 20-year-old, 25-year-old, he's got $10,000 in credit card debt. Each month he keeps like an extra $1,000. Do you think it would make sense for him to put that $1,000 towards investing or towards the debt that he carries?
How old was the guy?
25.
25. So very circumstantial, right? Obviously, it's going to depend on his income, right? It's going to depend on some of the different expenses that he has. We discuss opportunity cost a lot, right? And, when it comes to student loans, a lot of people think, oh man, I'm making X amount of money right now, whatever disposable, whatever extra I have, I'm going to throw it at my loans. I'm going to try as hard as I can to pay that down. When in reality, should you be paying it down? Of course, but what would it look like if you had allocated a portion of that debt payment to an investment account, right? What would that investment account grow over that same duration that you were going to be paying down your debt, right? You might, based off market returns, based off your investing, have an investment account at the end of that, debt duration, if you will, an investment account worth more than the debt you have altogether.
Well,
so yeah, Jordan, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the ways I look at it. Like, let's say the debt runs at like a 5%. If you have 5% on it, you can make an investment, make more than 5%, go with the investment. If you can, but as you were saying earlier with the credit cards where they're running 20, 25%, there's few things that can run 25% guaranteed. Like, so that might be your best investment is to pay that down potentially.
Yeah. Again, like I said, circumstantial to, obviously like what the debt is, right? Credit card debt's not
correct.
Right. It's credit card is not, that's not healthy to have. Right. So if that's something that is on your balance sheet, you're going to want to address that, right? You're going to want to turn your eye and Again, once I said I still don't think that doesn't mean sacrificing savings, but it certainly means sacrificing some other discretionary spending to be able to make sure that that debt gets under control.
Absolutely.
This page right here goes in a little deeper on everything we kind of just talked about, right? So from a sense of being able to increase your annual income, it really talks about sources of income, right? That might be available to everybody. So does the employer provide an annual cost of living? So that's what we were talking about, a raise, right? To make sure that we're keeping up with inflation, we're growing in our position. Is overtime pay available, right? Do we have other sources of income that might be available, like rental income, like you mentioned, Jordan? Do we have any hobbies or other personal efforts that can be used to generate income? And of course, are we aware of taxes, right? Taxes is a major part of everyone's financial blueprint on this call, right? Are we aware of being able to review, to minimize and deduct and eliminate as much tax as possible to really, at the end of the day, pay as little or pay as little as possible back to the federal government, right? We're all
run us through that. How does that work? Just go really layman's on what's taxes, how do some investments lower them or get rid of, how does that even work?
I think we have some CPA. We might have a CPA on this call, right? I mean, I might have to leave that part to him, to be entirely honest. No, it's obvious. I like to say we all have one uncle in common, right? And that's Uncle Sam. They're always going to come knocking, right? And they're going to ask for their fair share. And there's a lot of tax laws out there that CPAs and professional accountants can walk you through and allow you to understand the best way to minimize and eliminate taxes on your income, right? But in the scheme of things, for the most part, it's very hard to avoid them, right? In one way or another, we're always going to pay a certain percentage. And that makes sense. And that's what's built into financial planning, is planning for down the road, right? No one has a crystal ball on this call. We don't know who's going to be president, not 4 years from now, but 15, 20, 25, 30 years from now, when everybody on this call is starting to actually think about retirement, right? And every single one of us might have a 401k. All of that money is taxable, right? For the most part. So we have to start thinking to ourselves, okay, where are tax rates going in the future? Jordan, if you had to guess where tax rates were going in the future, where do you think they're going?
My thoughts are up.
They're most likely up, right? I think 99 out of 10 people, 9.9 out of 10 people would probably answer that way, right? So if that is the case, if that's the belief, wouldn't it make sense for us to start allocating our dollars to more efficient places to try and minimize our taxes? There's ways to do that, right? So that's a large part of financial planning when it comes to minimizing taxes.
Absolutely.
The saving 10% of our net annual income, right? So obviously very important to get a sense of, I challenge everybody to at least get a sense today, tomorrow, this week, how much am I saving right now of my net income, right? How much am I allocating on a month to month, on a year to year basis to all of my different savings buckets, right? What am I putting into my 401k? What am I putting into an emergency fund? Do I have an outside investment account? Do I have a real estate property that I'm investing some money into? Whatever that might look like.
Yeah. Jack, with most of your clients, do you find people know their numbers personally?
No, at least before I meet them, very few people do, and they might have a decent sense. They might have a sense of what they're contributing to their 401k, because that is the main vehicle that most people focus on for the long term, which that eventually gets them into trouble. I'm not saying 401ks are bad, but they're just not the end all, right? So we have to make sure that we're diversifying our blueprint to include not only a 401k, but some other outside help as well, some other alternatives. And no, altogether, people do not know what they're contributing for their gross or their net.
Yeah, because that's one of the funniest things I found is when I feel like when everyone was younger, they were always focusing on, I want to make this much money. I want to make that much money. Like, I want to make 200,000. I want to make 100,000. I want to make $1 million. But it's really how much we keep and how much we're actually, like, our net worth goes up. Like, the net worth is the real indicator of like where you want to look instead of the amount you make, because the net worth you're actually keeping.
Important indicators, right? Important, obviously, net worth for anyone that doesn't know, assets minus liabilities, right? So being able to keep track of the assets we own and then the loans that we owe to others, right? We deduct that from our assets. That's our net worth, right? So if we're tracking that and it's growing year over year, we're doing something right. And like you said, Jordan, that really is such an important metric to keep track of.
Absolutely.
Going back to the 10% annual income, right? How and how much are we saving each month, right? Has a household budget been created, right? Are we following it accurately? Do we have an emergency fund that equals 6 months of our salary? Do we automatically save a certain amount each day so that's automated and consistent, like we spoke about earlier? Do we understand the interest rates of our savings account and how much more money certain other accounts could offer, right? I know American Express high yield. I have one myself. I opened it up a couple of years ago. And I think at that time when interest rates were almost near zero, it was Amex was actually paying a pretty good number, 0.65%.
Yeah.
That was actually pretty good at that point. Now it's actually almost 1.5%, right? Interest rate going up. High yield savings account is paying 1.5% APR. So, that's a lot better. High yield savings account, that's a lot better than your average savings account at TD Bank, right? So it might be worth taking a look at, certain companies that offer just that higher interest rate, just a little bit more money on your money. Not saying it's going to be a lot, but why leave money on the table? Obviously, there are expenses that can be cut, right? Making sure that more funds, more disposable income we have access to, not only to save, but go have fun, right? We want to be able to limit expenses so that everything's on the table. Jordan, any questions there? Any thoughts?
No, that makes a lot of sense.
Excellent.
I like the distinction between the high, because here's the thing: everyone's going to keep cash. You have to keep some amount of cash, and if most banks are giving 0.01%, or which is like 1/10 of 1%, and you can get 15 times that at 0.15, like 1.5%, it's still like a relatively low amount, but it's completely safe. Like there's no variables with it. So it wouldn't be, there's plenty of reason to keep it there. Like it's definitely a major benefit.
Yep, completely. And just being aware, right? Being more cognitive, just being understanding where your money is and seeing if that is the best option, right? Am I being as productive and efficient with my dollars as possible? Looking at the retirement nest egg, right? I think this one was we obviously hit a good stride talking about retirement earlier. Have all of us thought about when we're going to retire, right? We're so young, it's so far away. Why would we be thinking about it, right? Well, it's important, right? Why not put a goal for 48 years old, right? Why not put a goal for 52? Why not say 37? When do we all want to retire, right? Have we identified a target retirement date? Social Security, that's not necessarily applicable to someone in their 20s right now. Social Security is one of those things we're never even sure if it's going to be there. We hope it is, but obviously provides some more guarantees, more certainty for people that are older now, and they know they're going to have some sort of check coming their way once they reach a certain age. We talked a lot about retirement accounts, 401ks, 403bs, IRAs, Roth. Are we aware of all of these? Well, we understand what they mean, or we understand the perks and the pros and the limitations that come with each of them, right? Which one should we have? Which one shouldn't we? Which ones kind of overlap, right? Any other sources of income, right? We talked a lot about real estate, certain products like annuities that eventually become appropriate and productive for people of certain ages. That can provide monthly income in retirement on top of everything else we have working for us. And then obviously, lastly, thinking about what the cost of retirement is going to look like, right? If we have a lifestyle in our head that we want to live, what's that going to look like, right? 30, 40 years from now with inflation, right? Taking into account that every year the cost of living goes up. So if you're saying to yourself right now, man, I could live a really great lifestyle for $250,000, right? For $250,000 a year. What's that look like 30 years from now? That 250 is not going to have the same buying power, right? It's not going to have the same purchasing power. We're going to have to aim a little higher than that if that's the lifestyle we're going to aim for, right? So that's how we look at long-term financial planning when I'm doing it for people nowadays.
Yeah, and one of the things that I definitely want to bring up, and this is something that me and Jack were actually talking about prior to the call, is like kind of like the zoom in, zoom out idea, where basically in our lives, we zoom in most of the time, and when we're zooming in, we're focusing on the little details. We're focusing on, oh, do I get a Chipotle bowl with chicken or steak? Because it's $1. It's a zoom in thing. It's a little thing. But in reality, the zoom in is focusing on the little details, but the zoom out is actually when we look long term. When we look at ourselves and we're 80 years old and we look back on our life and we go, did that make sense? Was I doing everything correctly? Like in my 20s, did I acquire assets? And acquiring assets can be anything. Like it can be getting real estate, it can be investing in the stock market, it could be life insurance, it could be 401ks, it can be anything. But it's that question of, am I starting? Am I going in the right direction? You got to realize that whenever you start anything, you're going to start small. So I don't want you to feel like, hey, if it's only $10, it's not worth it. Because these principles that Jack's explaining here are relevant to everybody in every single occasion. So whether you're making 50 grand a year, $5,000 a year, or $4 million a year, these are all relevant principles, in which case they can help you down the line and they'll help you long term. So I just wanted to bring up that point about the zoom in, zoom out, because a lot of the time we sit there and we go, Jack, I'm not retiring for 40 years. Why would I care? And retirement is like, you know what I mean? Why do I care? And it's because of that principle that we can use significantly less money now to build that up so that when we get there at the end, it's a lot simpler.
It's all perspective, right? And obviously there's a lot of discipline involved. There's a lot of sacrifice involved, right? So it doesn't mean you can't have fun now. It doesn't mean you can't live your life. It just means we have to be really cognitive of not living above our means, right? And looking ahead at the life that we know we are going to want at some point. And what is that going to cost? And how can I get there as quickly and effectively as possible?
Absolutely.
Last but not least is the paying down your debt, right? Yeah, go ahead.
Steven had a question.
Oh, go ahead.
Why you have to wait 40 years to retire? Steven, I'm just speaking out loud. But yeah, in about like 4 or 5 minutes, we'll unmute whoever wants to talk and we can ask some questions and kind of open up the conversation a little bit.
Yeah, certainly don't have to wait 40 years to retire. I don't know if I said that or Jordan said that. I think I threw out 37 years old as a possible retirement age. Hey, anything's possible, right? It just takes a little discipline. It takes, some pretty good investing and, what was he say?
No, Madison said too long. I'm ready right now.
There it is. I like it. See? So let's start allocating 20% of our gross income. We'll be right there. For everybody. We'll finish off with paying down the debt, right, within 20 years as a long-term goal. Do we know the total debt we have? Do we have a plan to pay it down? Including student loans, personal loans, credit cards. Do we understand the interest rate and what that means for each type of debt? Are we giving a greater priority to paying down higher interest loans? Are we giving a greater priority to paying down higher balance loans, right? There's different concepts and strategies to effectively pay down your debt as quick as possible. Are we allocating additional money towards paying down the principals in our debt? Have we created a pay down schedule, right? Do we know our credit score? These are all very important factors when it comes to debt. I don't know if anybody's ever signed on to Credit Karma. It's actually a pretty valuable website, to be entirely honest. Odds are, if you have a personal loan, credit card, mortgage, student loan, any type of federal or private loan, it's going to be on there. It's going to be listed. It's going to provide you with your credit score, and it's going to provide you with a bunch of recommendations on how to effectively pay that debt down, as well as raise your credit score. A lot of really great information on there. You can go on and you can see, which credit cards you have that have the biggest balance. Is it too high? Should you have more accounts? Because sometimes more credits actually helps a score, right? It's a really good website to at least start game planning if you do have debt.
Yeah, and you brought up an interesting point about the credit cards, and I spoke about it earlier, but credit cards can actually be a good utility because if you take the credit at a good time, like when you don't need the credit, then that gives you more flexibility down the line when you might be in a squeeze or like a crunch where you actually need that credit. So when you take credit, you want to take it before you actually need it. Meaning maybe you'll have 4 credit cards and one's got 10 grand, one's got 15, one's got 25, one's got 80,000. They all have different, and that's your credit limits, but together it's based on a credit utility. So more credit cards isn't essentially good or bad. It's just whatever you're using them for yourself.
Yeah, it makes sure you're just not living above your means, right? It takes a while to be able to get out from underneath that, and it can pile up very quickly, especially with high interest. So just being aware, having everything on one spot and understanding, all right, this is the number. We're going to limit this from now on. We're going to pay it down by certain time frame, right? And work towards that.
Absolutely. This was awesome. And are you able to share this?
I am, absolutely. I was just going to say, obviously on the bottom here, you can see there's some action steps. I can send this to you, Jordan. You can send it out to everybody that attended. Really allows you, obviously, to start putting a plan in place for any of these 4. I'm obviously available for help on the side if anyone wanted to talk offline. But otherwise, yes, absolutely able to share this, and you can start budgeting yourself.
Absolutely. So I know we got a couple questions. Not sure if people want to unmute. I see them in the chat. So maybe I can pick them up unless someone wants to unmute.
I can, I see some of them here. So Madison said best method to budget, right? So I have a Excel calculator that I can send to Jordan as well that I think is excellent. It's broken down into 2 columns, which allows you to have what your budgeted amount for different categories are in a month. So you have like necessities like groceries, rent, electricity, right? It's things like that. So what's the budgeted amount? And then the actual column. What did you actually end up spending within that month? So it takes some time, like Jordan did with his credit card. Like it's going to take some practice. It's going to take some discipline to get the calculator to work. But after, call it 6 weeks, you're going to start to see some results, and you'll start to see, all right, am I coming in under budget? Am I coming right in on budget, or am I over budget, right? And what category am I at a surplus or a deficit? So that calculator itself, I can certainly send out. Incredibly valuable. It'll have your income on the top, your expenses right below it. It'll tell you, what your disposable, what your just extra income on top of that in a month should look like. And you'll have a much better sense of where you stand. So it'll just take a little getting used to, but otherwise really, really great tool.
Absolutely. And one of the tools I use for myself it's called Personal Cap. So it's an app that you actually download on your phone. You link all of your bank accounts to it. You link your investment accounts. You can link your properties. Sometimes you just put the numbers in, like how much you owe on the mortgage. Some of them's manual put-ins, but I use that because that allows me to know my net worth. And knowing your net worth on a day-to-day basis, it's challenging. Most people have no clue what their net worth is. So if you're actually tracking, my feeling on it is if you're not tracking it, you're not growing it. Nothing grows without being tracked and managed. So net worth is definitely something that you should be checking on a monthly basis, yearly basis. The more often, the better, honestly, in my opinion. I know Steven had a question too.
Yes, I see.
He wrote that in the chat. Yeah.
Asset class. It's a great question, depending on
Just read it out loud.
Yeah. Given the possible current recession, depending on your definition, that made me laugh. Which asset classes are more or less interested in? Great question, right? And I wish I had a crystal ball and knew exactly what was going to go up 20%. Steven, I believe you're a real estate guy. Love real estate right now. Even with the rate increases, I still think there's a lot of value out there. For people that don't necessarily have the ability to do that yet, that maybe are looking for more attainable assets in general, I still will forever preach a dollar cost averaging long-term strategy, right? Being able to buy dividend stocks, dividend equities, right? Companies that have been around for a very long time, that give back to their shareholders, and are focused on maximizing profit for their shareholders. And over the long period of time, they're going to do just fine. And
Jack, you are a very smart guy. what is dollar cost average, dividends, equities? Just slow it down, bring it to us where we need to like truly understand it.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that. Dollar cost averaging essentially means that you would invest the same amount of money at the same point every month, right? So if a stock fluctuates from a month to month, it means you're purchasing the same amount, but at different price levels. And eventually, over a period of time, your price per share will decrease while the price of the stock will increase, increasing your profit, right? Now, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes a while, and a lot of people don't want to be patient, but that does work. Stephen, we can obviously get a little more micro. Commodities are obviously a really great place to be right now. I'm a big fan of oil for obvious reasons. But in general, keep an eye on interest rates, right? While interest rates are doing what they're doing right now, we want to see what the Fed is got their eyes on over the next 6 months. And while they're raising, and things are going to probably stay a little volatile. So just keep your eye on that. Once they stop raising rates, go nuts. But in the meantime, it could be a little choppy the rest of the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that response. Brad, do you have anything? Or Ben? I know you guys are on here. I want you to definitely give your opinions. Brad, you want to hop in really quick? I saw you unmuted.
I'm good, man. Thank you.
Any questions at all?
Nope.
It can be anything.
Everything's been clear, man.
Okay, awesome. Ben, you got anything? Oh, good. Oh, okay. We'll close this thing down. Jack, this has been fantastic. I love your perspective. I love that you took the time to share. And if anybody wants this link, I'll get the form, the 5, 10, 15, 20, and we can share that with you and make it easy. Jack, is there any way people could reach you? How does that work?
Yeah, you can reach out to Jordan. He has my contact information, and he's welcome to share it. And on top of the 5, 10, 15, 20, I'll share the budget calculator as well. I know Madison wanted that. That's a great tool. So I'll send both to you, and you can share that out with the group.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate the time.
You're very welcome. Take care, everybody.
Thank you for reaching the end of the podcast. For that, we'll give you a complimentary coaching session in the link below with Edwards Consulting. Hope to see you there, and have a great day, and keep clocking in.